Welcome to the Year 7 strategy for fractions. In this lesson I'm learning to use the part unknown strategy to compare amounts. So before you start this strategy you need to be really good at the Year 6 strategies. Well, you can see down here I've done two tests. I've got test 1 and test 2. In test 1 I got 2/5 of the words wrong, and there were 30 words in that test. And in test 2 I got 3/7 of the words wrong, and there were 35 words in that test. So just looking at these two, it's very hard for me to work out which test I did worst in, because the amounts are different. This is 30, this test had 30 words in it, and this one had 35, and the two fractions are different. So I'm going to have to work out both of these fractions before I can compare the amounts. So let's start with test 1. I have to imagine those 30 spelling words being shared into 5 groups. My denominator's told me that. So 30 shared between 5 groups means there must be 6 words in each group. Now my numerator tells me that I got 2 of those groups wrong. So 2 groups of 6 words is 12. And I'm going to circle that. Now I'm going to come over here to test 2. And in test 2 I have to imagine these 35 words being shared into 7 groups. So 35 divided by 7, and I know the answer to that is 5. Now my numerator says I got 3 of those groups wrong. So 3 groups of 5 equals 15. And I'm going to circle that amount. So now you can see in test 2 I got 15 words wrong, and in test 1 I got 12 words wrong. So to answer my original question, I got more words wrong in test 2 than I did on test 1. Let's try another question. You can see in this example there are 2 trucks. Truck 1 has to drive 80 kilometers, and so far it's driven 3/4 of that trip. And truck 2 has to travel 70 kilometers, and so far it's travelled 5/7 of its trip. I want to work out which truck has travelled the furthest so far. Now you can see it's difficult for me to compare these two amounts at the moment because the distances are different. The distance for truck 1 is 80 and the distance for truck 2 is 70. And both of these fractions are different amounts. So I'm going to have to work both these questions out separately and then compare the amounts. So let's start with truck 1. So I need to imagine this trip being split into 4 parts, and I need to share those 80 kilometers between those 4 parts. So I'm going to start with some division. 80 kilometers shared into 4 parts means each part of the trip must be made up of 20 kilometers. Now I know that I've done 3 parts of that trip, so 3 times 20, which is the number of kilometers in each part, equals 60. So I know truck 1 has so far travelled 60 kilometers. Let's see how far truck 2 has travelled. Well, I need to imagine this trip being split into 7 parts, and I need to share these 70 kilometers among those 7 parts. So I'm going to start with some division. 70 kilometers shared between the 7 parts means each part of the trip must be made up of 10 kilometers. Now so far I've driven 5 of those sections. So 5 sections times 10 kilometers, because I know there's 10 kilometers in every section, equals 50 kilometers. So I can see that truck 1 has travelled 60 kilometers, truck 2 has travelled 50 kilometers, which means truck 1 is the one that has travelled the furthest. Let's have a think about the important things to remember from this lesson. Well, when you're dealing with equations where the fractions are different and the amounts are different, it's very difficult to compare. So to help us compare, we have to work out each question separately. And to do that, we're using the strategies that we learned in the Year 6 lessons. You can find the activity sheet that goes with this lesson in the Teacher Tools Fractions, Decimals and Percentages book from the Whitebook collection.